right. All right. It is July 25th, 2025. We have passed the 6 month mark of the Donald Trump presidency here. So we are 12.5% of the way to the finish line. This is the Prospect Weekly Roundup. I am David Dayen, the executive editor of the Prospect. With me today, our very prolific writing fellow had 3 pieces on the site this week. We're going to talk about all of them. Emma Janssen. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. It's raining in Chicago, which I kind of love.
This is
Yeah,
thunderstorm season in Chicago. This is when you get the lightning, right?
yep. I was gonna go swim in the lake last night, and then I saw the lightning and figured that was probably not the safest use of my time.
Probably. All right then. So yeah, you had a bounty of stuff on the site and all good stuff, and I want to talk about it. I want to start with we'll go from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. So we started with you talking about one basically about the big, beautiful, big ugly bill, whatever you want to call it, that came out, was put into law on July 4th. And one of the major ways in which this bill cuts the social safety net is through work requirements. And that's not just on Medicaid, but also on food stamps. So could you talk about the different work requirements that are in this bill, and then we can just move on from there.
Definitely. So, like you said, it's not just Medicaid that is facing these increased work requirements after the bill was signed. It's also SNAP. And then, sort of separately, a lot of housing advocates are worried that these same things are going to come for housing, but that would be through separate legislation or rules.
Right.
But basically, the main concern is that now for Medicaid, people will be required to work at least part-time. So 80 hours a month is the number to receive their benefits. And I think one of the things that I tried to underscore in my piece is, there are kind of the philosophical or ethical, moral questions about work requirements, but there are also the very kind of logistical and administrative questions. So to get into those briefly, one of the major concerns that advocates have been saying about Medicaid work requirements is just like, how do people prove that they've worked 80 hours a week? We don't really have, we don't have any systems pre-built to
Mm-hmm.
allow people to submit that documentation. And we also don't have any laws that require employers to even create documentation of hours worked. Some,
Right.
bigger companies might give you that on like a pay stub or something, but most don't. And a
So it's
lot
a
of,
question of how do you prove that, and specifically, how do you prove the hours, right?
yes,
Because you might be able to prove you're working,
yeah,
but the idea that you have to prove this minimum 80-hour a month requirement, that's going to be a new system has to be built for that.
exactly. And it's also important to note that some people work, but it might not be a consistent like 20 hours a week every single week that gets you to your 80-hour week total. There's such thing as seasonal work where
Right.
someone could be working full time for, the summer or something and not during other seasons. And they require in this legislation that I believe every 6 months, it needs to be
Right.
rechecked whether or not you're working. So that could cause a real problem for some people who are, in fact, working, just
Right.
not in the way that this is designed to catch.
People could be jumping on and off and on and off and churning in and out of the system because of their erratic work schedules.
Yes. And then there's also the question, people who might be working, consistently every single day, even like gig workers, delivery drivers who,
Hmm.
will go drop off your Instacart order, or
Hmm.
um, Uber drivers. A lot of that work requires waiting around for
Right.
actual like calls to come in. And a question, I spoke to Matt Brunig of the People's Policy Project, and that was a question he raised with me, which is like, does that downtime count towards 80 hours?
Right.
Or is it the active time that you're driving with someone's groceries in your back seat? So
Yeah. And
plenty.
that's a question of that's like a larger question around, some of these states have imposed minimum wages for
Yeah,
gig workers.
yeah,
And again, they're like, well, does the time spent idling count towards the minimum wage, or is it only a minimum wage when I'm driving someone or something?
yeah.
And this falls into the same trap.
Yep.
And I think sort of behind all of these logistical questions is the larger point that this isn't about work. This is really about kicking people off the program for
Yes.
technicalities.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest, if not the single biggest takeaway
Hmm.
that I have had as a writing fellow the past few months of the Trump administration is that it's not politically popular to just destroy Medicaid, all told, or SNAP, but it is politically popular-ish. I can get into that to say people should be working. Let's make sure they work, bootstraps argument,
Right.
etc.
Right.
But they accomplish the same thing. We know from past examples where states have tried to implement work requirements that the effect is the same. People will just drop off of the program and not have health insurance. So
And
yeah,
and on the flip side of that, it does not increase work
yeah,
throughout the state. And so
yeah,
Georgia and Arkansas are two of the states that have implemented this briefly. There was a lawsuit during the first Trump administration. They tried to get a waiver, and ultimately the lawsuit said they couldn't continue to implement the programs.
yeah,
But for a short time they did, and like you say, it took thousands, tens of thousands of people off of these programs without increasing the labor force participation rate
yeah.
in these states in any way.
Exactly. And yeah, it was like 18,000 people all told in Arkansas.
Right.
And
Which is a small state, so that's not a small number.
no, it's not. And the other issue that kind of came up for Arkansas was like, how do you contact current Medicaid recipients and make sure they know that this change is coming and make sure they know that suddenly there's going to be this online portal where you have to submit these documents, especially in areas where or states where you have a really large like rural population or a population that just doesn't get a lot of internet access or doesn't have technological literacy at the level that you would
Well,
ideally
and,
have it.
and I would say, especially in states that kind of don't want you to be on the program. So, they just don't have an incentive to inform the public about these new requirements that you're going to have to, these new hoops you're going to jump through in order to stay on the program. Like that's kind of the whole point. Sometimes I've likened it to, in the old days, before there was the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies would say, oh, yeah, we take all comers. But the insurance office would be on the sixth floor of a building with no elevator, right? So you'd have to walk up the stairs, and a sick person isn't going to be able to do that. And so
Yeah,
that's how they cleverly kept people out of the program while not explicitly saying, if you're sick, we don't want you.
yeah.
We don't want to cover you with insurance. So, these are it's an exclusionary program without saying it's exclusionary explicitly.
And yeah, now the version of that sixth floor walk up is, you know, log into this website that you've never been to before with what computer and what Wi-Fi connection and submit a document that you don't have.
Right.
And maybe the system isn't even correctly built. So then there's all this
Right.
administrative work. You have to call someone, you don't have a phone.
And the
That's what
thing is, this is going to cost a lot of money for the states, right?
it's going to cost a ton of money. So I'm trying to remember the exact figures, but 4 states that have tried to do this in the past
Hmm.
waivers, they racked up, hundreds of millions per state sometimes.
Right.
I want to say it was Tennessee that had like the highest number, and it was in the hundreds of millions. And then other states, they were seeing at least in the tens of millions to
Right.
implement these new systems. So in the big, beautiful bill, they were like, oh, we've got you covered. We're going to give all 50 states, we're going to make this pot of money that will be shared between the 50 states,
Right.
200 million, which
Right.
is not even enough to cover one state, as we've
That's
seen in the past.
$4 million a state. Yeah.
Yeah, which
So
is not.
that's not going to go very far.
Yeah,
So yeah, and then the other thing that's interesting to me, and I don't think we have total clarity on this, is that the way the bill is written, it says these work requirements have to kick in by beginning of 2027, I believe.
yeah,
And everyone's like, "Oh, how clever of the Republicans to move this stuff out after the midterm elections." However, it says that if a state wants to do this earlier, they can get a waiver under the same waiver process by which, in the first Trump term, these programs were allowed, and that would be legal. Basically, sidesteps the judicial litigation that derailed these in the first term. So you have all these states that actually had tried to do this, Georgia, Arkansas, and several others,
yeah,
that are being told, well, you can go ahead and do this now. You
yeah,
can do this anytime you want. And that could be before the midterm elections. And it'll be
yeah,
very interesting to see if the states take them up on that, because there's this theory that once you put this in place, it's going to be very unpopular. But they've already done it. Like, what's stopping Georgia right now from doing this?
yeah. So that is definitely a thread that I will try to be following, is just, are people going to start this imminently, and what kinds of logistical issues are they going to run into? It might be a good way to sort of offer a prediction of what this program, when it reaches the whole nation, could look
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, really interesting. And then, SNAP, my understanding is SNAP already had, just to briefly talk about this,
Mhm.
SNAP already had some work requirements in it, whereas Medicaid never did, even though most people on Medicaid who uh, don't have a disability or aren't children already work.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's not much of a need for this in Medicaid at all. But SNAP already had work requirements. So what changes here in the big beautiful bill?
Yeah. So the main thing to know about the SNAP changes is, yes, they had work requirements. It was a similar, like, 80-hour a month situation. But there were a number of exemptions. So with SNAP, I guess there is an acknowledgement that sometimes you will find yourself unemployed, and that shouldn't mean that you're going to just lose your food benefits immediately. So there's basically, with SNAP, they say you can get 3 months if you're unemployed. What is it? There's like a window where you can be unemployed and you will still get benefits, but at a certain point, they'll kick you off, I think around 3 months. But here's the issue. Now, a lot of these exempted categories, like veterans or homeless people, or,
Hmm.
uh, I think parents of teenagers, I want to say, used
And people, older, like younger seniors between the ages of
yeah,
55 and
and
64, I think as
64,
well. Yeah.
yes. They used to be exempt from that pretty rigorous work requirement, where you got a little buffer period if you got unemployed, but really not a significant one.
Right.
Now they're no longer exempt. So if you are a homeless person, who, it's so difficult for the homeless to get access to almost anything, not to mention work opportunities.
Right.
Um, if you don't have a house or a place to shower or sleep safely. And now if they have SNAP, they will lose those
Right.
benefits if they're not working. So
Right.
just ridiculous.
And then the idea is, or the fear, as you mentioned earlier, is that this could creep into housing. And basically, my view is, if you've started down this road of saying, okay, work requirements is something we're going to impose, this work test on people for federal benefits, then there's no reason that it wouldn't creep into every kind of benefit for the poor.
Yeah, so that's exactly what housing advocates told me. They are following a number of some legislation that is currently working its way through Congress that might implement those work requirements through the legislative branch, but they're also looking and watching HUD to see if new rules come out from
Hmm.
the administrative side of government that
Yeah.
could implement those. So that is, it's kind of a waiting game right now, but that's very much on the horizon.
Right. And like there is this issue of, are these all even lined up? Like, could you be working, but you're working in such a way that it qualifies you for housing, but it doesn't qualify you for Medicaid, and it
Yeah.
maybe qualifies you for SNAP, and like all
Yeah.
of these different systems where you have to send in the same paperwork to different agencies to qualify for all this. It's kind of outrageous,
Yeah.
and this bureaucracy is by design. This is the GOP bureaucracy, and it has a very specific intent. So great piece there. I want to move on. You have been focusing a lot on the Make America Healthy Again movement, and the various ways in which uh, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and some of his allies have been pressuring food companies to make their food healthier in particular. And you've kind of divined like how the food industry has kind of figured out how to play this game. So tell us about that.
Yes. So you may have heard that Coke will now apparently make a cane sugar sweetened version of Coke instead of the normal product that's sold in the US, which is sweetened with high fructose corn syrup. They're both different kinds of grasses, sugarcane versus corn.
Right.
But, that's cane sugar, I guess, sounds better than high fructose corn syrup. So
I mean, many think it tastes better, right?
it's true. Mexican
Yeah,
Coke is
right.
already sold in the US. It's made with cane sugar, and I will say it is delicious. But really, what we're seeing, if you look at the X accounts of mostly RFK Jr., but also the White House account or Trump's, Truth Social account, you basically see this kind of, you're scrolling through and it's like an advertisement reel for big food companies. It's like
Right.
one week he'll be praising, Kraft for saying that they're getting rid of artificial dyes. And then he's
Right.
praising PepsiCo for changes they're making to soda and chip products. Then it's Welch's fruit gummies, and now it's Coke. And
Right.
really, it's these changes that scientifically and health wise are not supported fully in the literature. So they're very superficial changes. They're
Right.
also changes that companies say, we'll do this in like 2 or 3 years, or they just say, we're going to do this at some point. It's not like a rigorous, they're not actually making these switches quickly or with any sort of haste. Um, and there's nothing binding about them. They can just
Right.
reverse them the minute that RFK Jr., is no longer pushing them to
Right.
make these changes. But they get free advertising from the MAHA world and the MAGA world. So
And kind of a validation that it's okay to have a bunch of Coca-Cola every day,
yeah,
and that won't affect your health because now it's a healthy version of Coke, right?
yeah,
Allegedly. Or that all we have to do is take the food dyes out of Fruit Loops, and Fruit Loops are suddenly healthy now for you. So you can just eat Fruit Loops every day.
yeah,
The point is that we've had a system of the reverse food pyramid, and
mhm,
nutrition guidance, and get vegetables and get fruits. And this is a very different version of that,
yeah,
saying, okay, we're going to make all the really unhealthy processed stuff slightly less unhealthy. Maybe, I mean,
maybe.
maybe it's
Not even
unhealthy.
guaranteed.
Not even guaranteed that it's less
Yeah,
unhealthy. But it's weird because you have Republicans sort of adopting the tactics that they used to decry as the nanny state.
yeah,
So they're dictating what ingredients can go into certain food items,
yeah,
right? So it's the kind of thing they would have hated if Democrats were doing it, and indeed did hate when someone like Michelle Obama was doing nutrition guidance for school lunches and things
yeah.
like that. But they're doing it in such a way that is totally, as you say, superficial, and not intended to actually create any kind of sustainable solution insofar as people's health is concerned.
Yeah, and then I think you have to take, I think we should take the hype around make America healthy again seriously, and we should take, I would like to see Democrats fill the space that has been created by
Mm.
MAHA and
Hmm.
say, like, yes, I do think, big food is harming us. I do think there are issues with pharma companies and big ag, et cetera. But you have to look at everything that the MAHA movement is doing and put everything in that context, because
Right.
like we were just talking about, they're also making cuts to SNAP, and they're also making
Right.
cuts to Medicaid. And if you care about the health of Americans, wouldn't you want them to eat, to have money to buy food,
Right.
especially ideally, whole foods, fruits and vegetables,
Right.
beans, rice. And wouldn't you also want them to be able to see the doctor to keep their diabetes managed? Like,
Right.
to me, that is actually making Americans healthy. And so I find it so difficult to trust
Yeah.
anything that comes from the MAHA movement. You know,
100%. And then, the other things that you talk about with respect to this change by Coca-Cola, which is really interesting, is the nature of what it means. I mean, they're not changing wholesale from high fructose corn syrup to cane sugar. They're adding it as a version that's already available, as you say, in most big stores. So what is the difference here? But, they're going to take at least some of their corn syrup and use cane sugar instead. And what does that mean, economically? Talk about that aspect of it.
yeah. So when this announcement was made, a lot of corn farmers in states like Iowa, which I just drove through recently, and it is just all corn. They like it's all corn.
Yeah.
They got really concerned, and two major food processing corporations, their stocks actually fell the day of the announcement. And I think they've since kind of rebounded, but it's clear that there was some financial concern, and the market reflected that. And this has
Yeah.
actually been a longstanding issue for RFK Jr. When he was appointed, a lot of Congress people from states like Iowa or, any other state that relies heavily on corn and the food processing industry were kind of like, we need to educate this guy a little bit about corn, about high fructose corn syrup.
I mean,
And
I
yeah,
mean, let's just stipulate that it's not a good thing that we have
yeah,
essentially a monocrop culture
yes,
in the United
exactly.
States where corn and soybeans are essentially what's grown here in large ways, and there's not crop diversity and things like that.
Yep.
Uh, Corn syrup isn't really the big thing that
Yeah,
that leads to that. It's really more corn being used as grain for meat, being used as
exactly.
cheap grain for animals,
Yep.
and so that's kind of the reason why corn and soybeans are prominent, and then why you get this big sort of political constituency that drives you towards this and looks for other ways to use corn,
Yeah.
including but not limited to high fructose corn syrup. I mean,
Yeah.
ethanol rules, which got a
Ethanol.
big boost in the big beautiful bill, by the way. So we're using more. We're going to use more of this, which is heavily destructive because the amount of farmland that you have to use to create fuel out of corn is worse for the environment than the benefit of using that fuel.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of problems with this, and there's a sense that maybe shaking this up isn't a terrible thing, even if high fructose corn syrup is kind of a small version, a small portion of the overall usage of corn in agriculture. But the other side of this is
Yep.
that there's a whole sugar aspect to it. So talk about that.
Exactly. So we in the US, we do make some cane sugar. We don't make a lot of it though. And part of the reason for that is that the market for it is really consolidated. There is a
Yeah.
sugar monopoly in the US. So we actually import a ton of sugar from countries like the Dominican Republic or Brazil or Mexico. And those, there are pre-existing tariffs on those products even before Trump. And so cane sugar is going to be a costlier product since we don't
Right.
produce it here. in large quantities due to monopolies, and we just have to export it from countries. We put a tariff on it. So that cost is going to be translated to the consumer of this new cane sugar Coke.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, really what we're doing, you don't see this in the fine print on Truth Social, but we're going to be making Coke more expensive for people to buy, and or at least that version of it. I mean, the Brazil tariffs that have been proposed are 50%.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a significant increase in the input costs for Coca-Cola to make this product that they were kind of bullied into making.
We get a ton of sugar from Brazil. And then briefly, I just wanted to plug an article of mine that is coming out soon, magazine article that I care a lot about, that if you're interested in this kind of monocrop, corn, soy, snap, sugary drinks, keep an eye out. It's all in
Yeah.
the article.
Next week you'll see that. Maybe we'll have to have you back. All right, great. Well, I think that was really interesting too. And then this third one that you did in conjunction with Whitney Wimbish, our staff writer, came out today. It's at the site right now. And it's about this kind of unusual alliance between environmentalists and truckers.
Yeah.
And I found this totally fascinating. So just tell me about this story.
Yeah. So our story largely is centered around the Ohio River Valley, and a couple of main players there. It is a region that is, stunningly beautiful, but that has been just really decimated by the fracking industry. We link to maps in our stories where you can see the number of fracking wells in that area, and it's
Mhm.
like you close up on this map and it's just incomprehensible. Anyways, I'm getting off track, but the story is that truckers are a major part of this kind of fracking industry ecosystem. They bring, oil and gas products from the source wells to wherever they need to go next. And crucially, they also transport a lot of the waste that is created by
Mhm.
fracking.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there are so many different kinds of waste products created by fracking. One of them is brine, which is the soup of water, chemicals, sludge, dirt,
Right.
gets shot at extremely high pressures into the earth to release the oil and gas. And so truckers are responsible for bringing that waste product to where it needs to go. They, there's this coalition of truckers who say, hey, we are constantly surrounded by these chemically rich batches of liquid or sludge or dirt or sand that have elevated levels of the radioactive metal
Right.
radium,
Mhm.
that contain volatile organic compounds, all sorts of other nasties. And they are receiving little to no training, no protective gear. Oftentimes, their trucks aren't placarded with anything that indicates that it's hazardous.
Mm.
And there have been many situations where, unfortunately, like these trucks roll over. These are big trucks. That is something that happens. Uh,
Accidents happen, sure.
Accidents happen, but then we have spills of these chemicals leaching into reservoirs and creeks and under the ground, and jeopardizing first responders, jeopardizing whoever lives there, whoever drinks that water. So we just saw this alliance between environmentalists who live in the region and who have experienced severe health effects from, air and water pollution there. So, teaming up with these truckers who in many cases are like their high school friends who went on into working in industry, who are kind of some of the front line people being exposed to these chemicals. So,
Right.
I mean, just it's such a like horrible thing to report on, but it was also, I think Whitney and I both got such a sense of like solidarity between the groups and a sense of real like purpose and love for the land with everyone that we spoke to for this
Yeah.
article, which was
Really
really
interesting.
touching.
Yeah. I mean, there is a sense, and by the way, there's a comment here from Thought Takes says, I
Mm.
come from a frac sand mining community. The companies leave the pits open, do no remediation, taking the fine instead. So
Yeah,
the fines are the cost of doing business rather than actually cleaning up,
yeah,
and then exposing, the communities. What I thought was really interesting about this is there is this assumption
mhm,
that there is a divide between the two communities that you say are working together in this piece.
mhm.
And it's a divide that is as much cultural as it is anything else. The idea that, oh, truck drivers, they're going to be put off by anti-fracking activists talking about climate and talking about, all the things that anti-fracking activists talked about. They're supposed to be on opposite sides of the divide. We've
Yeah,
had Donald Trump like in a truck, a big 18-wheeler in the White House. Those are supposed to be his people, right?
yeah,
But what you see is this commonality
yeah,
around their own personal health and their respect for the land.
yeah.
And that brings it together. Yeah, go ahead.
And it's, I think, this realization, and I don't think that's the right word because they know it already. It's us who aren't living there who are realizing it. It's this idea that no, that's not the divide. The divide is not between truckers and environmentalists. The divide is between the companies polluting the area and
Right.
the people who are suffering from that, who are people like Jill Hunkler, who lived in a beautiful valley and had to
Yeah.
move. She was getting rashes and body aches. And it's her high school classmates who, were told that they could make decent money, in some cases, really good money, hauling just water or
Right.
brine
Right.
and realizing, quickly
That's
that
yeah.
that's not what they were hauling. They were hauling radioactive materials and they were not receiving any hazmat training.
So how are these communities working together? What are they doing? For example, Jill Hunkler and
Yeah.
the truckers in this area.
Yeah, so they are doing a lot of things, and there's kind of a long history of things that they've been doing. But why we wrote the article now is because they teamed up with Earth Justice, that does legal advocacy on a lot of these same issues, to
Hmm.
send a letter to the government, to the Department of Transportation, and other agencies that deal with hazardous materials and trucking. And they essentially, said, hey, we need you to enforce your regulations that already exist
Right.
around the transport of hazardous materials. They are not asking yet for any new laws around this. They're simply asking, they're saying, hey, similar to what our commenter said, these companies will not self-enforce
Right.
laws. They will instead just take fines. There is no carrot or stick for them to self-enforce these regulations. So we need the government to come in and force them to abide by the existing laws. So, there's no public comment yet from the agencies who received the letter from Earth Justice on behalf of
Hmm.
groups. But I did speak to an attorney at Earth Justice who said they have had some preliminary conversations with folks in these agencies who say that it is a priority for them. And it kind of makes sense that it should be, right? Because, like you said, Trump in the 18-wheeler, Trump purports to care a lot about industrial workers and
Right.
their financial health, their health. Rhetorically, he cares about this. So I think it'll be a question of whether or not the policy matches the rhetoric.
Well, it's a good wedge issue. I mean, usually the policy doesn't match the rhetoric
Oh,
when you're talking about the Trump administration. But it's a good thing to point to and try to get a real coalition around. And it sounds like this coalition is pretty broad. That's the way that you sort of force action to happen is you build the broadest coalition possible.
yeah.
So.
So
Um, yeah, really, really interesting stuff. I'm glad you wrote that one. Um, uh, so we got some time left, so maybe we can talk about some of the things also going on in the news. And the biggest thing, and we did a whole hour on this last week, was this continuing fallout from this Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And there were a lot of developments this week.
Yeah.
We learned that Trump was told in May that he was in the files and information that the Justice Department has since refused to disclose,
Yep.
that he knew this and was asked about it later directly by a reporter and lied and said, no, no, they never told me anything about whether I was in the Epstein files. And so there's that aspect of it. There's obviously what happened sort of late last week, which was this letter in a book that was
Mhm.
put together for Epstein's birthday, his 50th birthday. And subsequent reporting shows that there was a roster of who's in the book, and Trump's name is in that. And then the journal was sued, the Wall Street Journal, which they published this story, they broke the story. They were sued by the president for, I think, $20 billion, which is interesting because the president can sue anybody he wants, but nobody can sue the president. That's what Supreme Court precedent kind of shows at this point. Um, uh, and then the Journal put out a story like, oh, there were a lot of people in the birthday book, including Bill Clinton, including these other people, as if Democrats who have pounced on this story are going to say, oh, well, if Bill Clinton's a problem, then we'll back off. I don't think that is the issue. I don't think that that's going to deter Democrats from taking a look at a scandal when they see it. And even more important, the House of Representatives was supposed to be working this week.
Mhm.
And because of Republicans not wanting to have to continue to take votes about the Epstein scandal, they called off the entire week and ran away and went on their August recess early so that there's now how the House is going to be out for 6 weeks because of this. And it's the kind of the first moment where Democrats have kind of taken some control over the House and really put up a situation that has stopped the House from operating. And, given how precious and short the time is when parties control various chambers of the legislature, any delay like this of 6 weeks is really significant. And it's all because, Republicans are afraid to confront this issue and confront their constituents who are screaming about it directly.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last point is something that's been really, I don't know, it's kind of the thing that I'm thinking about the most about this whole issue is this is animating Trump's base in a really serious way, and it makes sense. I mean, um, allegations of child predation are such an important part of, I would say, like 21st century Republican politics in a way. And you have QAnon, you have
Right.
all this Epstein stuff, so much more. And I just, it seems like maybe Trump will actually have to reckon with his base in a way that I'm not sure he has to this degree before. But
Well, he
I
doesn't know what to do. I
yeah,
mean,
he
you
doesn't.
look at him talking to reporters that ask him any Epstein thing, and he says things like, "Well, no, this is what you should be focusing on. This is what you should be talking about," in a way that makes him look so small.
Yeah.
Like it's just the deflection is so pathetic.
Because he
Um,
usually doesn't. He usually takes things head on, even if he then ends up saying something ridiculous and stupid. So yeah, it is it's shrinking. It
yeah,
is. Mm.
completely. And I think for what I've said before, that there is an actual policy issue behind this, and that's the issue of elite impunity. That not just that this man got away with these activities for so long. I mean, I mentioned this week in some of my reporting that Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, got into office in Florida. She was the Attorney General of Florida before she was the Attorney General of the United States. And she got into office in 2011, right after Jeffrey Epstein ended his jail term for solicitation of prostitution in Florida, where he was a resident. And Bondi left office after 2 terms in Florida in 2019, right before Epstein was arrested for sex trafficking at the federal level. And so she was the Florida Attorney General for 8 years
Oh,
during in between those two events without doing a damn thing about Jeffrey Epstein.
yeah.
And so that's one thing, that shows the sort of ways in which uh, people with power and influence get away and have a different system of justice that they deal with
Yeah.
than everybody else.
Yep.
And this now has floated all the way up to Donald Trump, who can decide that the thing that he was banging on about for years is suddenly not an issue anymore when he might have to face some accountability for it. So there is a real issue here. So, I mean, everybody is asking, well, why are Republicans, why are the MAGA types angry about this when they haven't been angry about any other Trump lie or any other thing that he said or thing that he's gone back on before? And I think because it connects to this issue that really goes back 20 years, it really animates a lot of why MAGA got big to begin with, which is the loss of control people feel like they have over their lives, and the fact that the people who do run this country don't operate by the same set of rules. I mean, this is sort of writ large. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about the anger that has allegedly bolstered the MAGA movement. And so, whether you're talking about the financial crisis and no bankers going to jail, or you're talking about, no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and nobody facing accountability for that, those kinds of things are recapitulated in this Epstein scandal in ways that are very accessible to people.
Do you think that this time will prove to be different to other times that Trump has maybe had to face up against his base or take accountability for, misuse of power? Do you see this going in any sort of positive direction, or do you think his deflections will eventually work?
It has been. I mean, it already has been a much bigger firestorm than anything else. It's been the one issue where MAGA has decided not to swallow the Kool-Aid. I mean, they are angry about this. You look at polling, and Republicans, by numbers that you'd think they were Democrats, are mad about this, and they're upset with his handling of it. So the answer is yes to that. Now, there was another very interesting development that happened this week, and that involved Ghislaine Maxwell, who is in prison for aiding and abetting sex trafficking. She was found guilty. She's serving, I believe, a 20-year sentence. And this week, Todd Blanchet, who is a deputy attorney general, went to speak directly with her,
Yeah.
and in a way that suggests, okay, she's trying to get out of prison. They're trying to exonerate Trump. So, you can see the quid pro quo here. She
Yeah.
gets leniency for naming names and exonerating Donald Trump in some way from this scandal. And, that's kind of the theory, the operating theory that everybody's working under, that's what's that's what they're trying to put together here. But I'll tell you, if Donald Trump and his team thinks that letting Ghislaine Maxwell out of prison is not going to cause an absolute firestorm,
Yeah.
they are blind.
Yeah.
Like there is absolutely no way that you can let Ghislaine Maxwell out of prison and not expose yourself to an absolute torrent of enmity
Mm.
over that. I think that the idea that they can sort of backhand a deal that maybe they name some prominent Democrat and then they try to put that person in prison or something like that. I just don't think that's going to work.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine what that would look like if they did move forward with that. I mean, I completely agree. I think it would be just outrageous. I don't think people would fall for it. I think that
They're kind of already doing it in other contexts. Like if you look at the Kilmar Abrega Garcia stuff,
mm,
I mean, they're taking a guy who was in prison
mhm,
and having him basically lie about Kilmar's presence and participation in smuggling migrants across the border in exchange for his leniency. And this was a guy convicted of a violent crime. And so that they're rerunning that
like,
play. But the difference is, some random person who's in prison for a violent crime is not Ghislaine Maxwell. Like you can't
yeah.
do that with something so high profile as the Epstein scandal. I just,
Mhm.
it's not going to work.
Yeah. Do you think that this will end up with a release of the files? Will the documents come out? I mean, I it seems
Well,
hard to
there are a
imagine
couple developments on that front. Number one, so Trump put out this thing there where he said, "Oh, I think we should release all the grand jury information, the pertinent information from the grand jury."
Mhm.
And Bondi said, "Yes, sir, I'll do that." And she went to the grand jury, she went to the place of jurisdiction and said, "Please release this." So we got one answer. I guess there were three different grand juries that were impaneled, so they went to three different places. The one in Florida, the judge said, "No, we're not doing that. The precedent of of this district is that grand jury materials are secret, and we're going to keep them secret." And Trump knew that, and Bondi knew that when they made the request. They knew that now they can blame the grand jury rather than
themselves.
themselves. The grand jury information was just a small portion of what the FBI collected,
Mhm.
and so this was always deflection, but that's sort of withering. But at the same time, I mean, what is happening in the House? The votes that House Republicans are running away from
Yeah.
are resolutions to release the files, and those resolutions might get like veto overridable votes in the
Wow.
House.
Yeah, yeah, I believe that.
You're going to have every Democrat, and you're going to have a number of Republicans who are going to agree to this. And even if you get only half of the Republicans, that's enough to overturn a presidential veto. And I'll say one more thing
Yeah.
before I get your thoughts. The House Oversight Committee,
Mhm.
a subcommittee of those, before they left town for the week, there was a vote in one of these subcommittees that subpoenaed the Justice Department to release these files.
Okay.
And it got all the Democrats and three Republicans. So it was an 8-2 vote in that subcommittee. So we now have a subpoena
Okay.
approved by that subcommittee. Now, my expectation is that the chair of that subcommittee is going to play games. He's a Republican. His name's Clay Higgins. He's going to say, "Oh, well, we're writing up the subpoena. We're working on it," and he's going to try to drag his feet and drag out the process a little bit. But there is a bill written by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, Republican Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Democrat Ro Khanna of California. And they're using a process that's called a discharge petition. And what that means is that if you have a majority of House members who sign on and say this bill should get a vote, that bill automatically goes to the floor. The Speaker of the House can't block it. And this is one reason why they left town, by the way, because they now have enough Republicans that if all the Democrats signed on to this discharge petition, they could get a floor vote, and they will get a floor vote. It'll just happen in September
Yeah.
when they come back. To me, that keeps the issue alive for a month and a half. Like, it's not like just because you left town, nobody's going to talk about this. It's probably going to grow and grow and grow, and it gives journalists more time to uncover information about connections between Trump and Epstein, and et cetera. So, but it's going to get a House vote, and it's probably going to get a big victory in the House. And there are similar kinds of operations going on in the Senate. So, you ask, is the information going to come out?
Yeah.
I think Congress is going to try to force this issue, and they may even succeed, even though Congress is in the hands of Republicans.
Well, that's kind of my follow-up question, which is just, with these resolutions and I guess the subpoena that you mentioned, what is the legal power of those to force information out? I just like, can they actually straight up, if they get enough votes, get the information released, or is it more complicated?
Well, that's where this turns into something that looks like the Watergate scandal, right? Because at issue there was the House Judiciary Committee was subpoenaing the president for releasing audio tapes and documents and things like that. And the president was saying executive privilege, I don't have to release those. And then the court said, no, you actually do have to release those. And of course, you're way too young to know this, but there was the release of audio tapes because Nixon taped his conversations in the Oval Office, and they released these tapes, and it had a mysterious 16-minute gap in the tapes, which was the key incriminating information was contained in that gap. So, but I mean, the point is, like, we've seen this movie before. Will Trump agree to just release the documents because of a subpoena? Probably not. But will that be a constitutional crisis that will then be adjudicated by the courts? Yeah. And, obviously we have different courts than we did in 1973 and
Yeah.
1974, and they might, but I think the public opinion of that is going to be very, very negative. If the Roberts court says you can keep the Epstein files secret, like, what the courts are doing now to sort of, kowtow to Trump has been really bad, but it's kind of limited to court watchers and
Yeah.
obsessives and political junkies. If they do this, suddenly everybody and their mother is going to know, like, okay, the Supreme Court just helped Trump block scrutiny of his connections to a pedophile. Like that, there's no way around that if you're the president, and it's really, really damaging. So, it might not turn out the same way as Watergate, but it will be as politically damaging, I think, as something like that was.
Mm. Oh, the court example, like tracing it all the way up. Yeah, that would get people. I can just see it now. Like it goes all the way to the Supreme Court,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think this issue is still bubbling. It's not going away. There's going to be a lot more discussion about that. Um, uh, Maybe at this point, we only have a few minutes left, but as you mentioned, you have some a big story coming out next week that maybe we can get into a little bit of a preview, and I can preview my story. Basically, we're rolling out our August print issue. We actually send dead trees to people. We send you. Well, I mean, I know that was a sensitive subject with you, but we send words printed on paper, and we send them to your mailbox if you want to get them at prospect.org. And we also post those things online. You can go to prospect.org/subscribe if you want to subscribe to our print edition. And we also post those stories online, and we're going to start rolling those out next week. It's our August 2025 issue. My feature for that is I'll give you a small preview of it. It's about Greg Casar. It's a profile of Greg Casar. He is the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He is a second-term congressman, so in his second term, he already got the chairmanship of the largest caucus in the House of Representatives. And he comes from a labor organizing background, and he's kind of trying to do for the Democrats what he did for immigrant construction workers in Texas. He's from the Austin area, and it's a really interesting story about how he's bringing those skills to Washington and using them to try to organize the Democrats in a way that can get them out of this post 2024 rut and find a path not only to win elections again, but also deliver for
Yeah,
people. So that's what my story is going to be about. And Emma, you also have a feature in this upcoming edition. And why don't you give us a little capsule summary of that?
sure. Well, first, I'm very excited to read yours. I I love a good profile and with such a great figure too. So, okay, moving on to mine. Like I said earlier, it kind of continues some of the curiosities that I have had about SNAP, um, how it intersects with the Make America Healthy Again movement,
Right.
and also how it just intersects broadly with the entire ecosystem of anti-poverty work and the food systems in our country. And,
Hmm.
as I've been reporting on these issues, I just see how much they all interact with each other and are all dependent on each other.
Hmm.
Um, so a new development in kind of that world is that some states, I think it's 6 right now, are trying to ban the purchase of sugary foods and drinks from uh, with SNAP dollars.
With SNAP
So
money. Yeah, right.
exactly. So,
Yeah,
you can still buy them, but you can't use your SNAP benefits to do so.
right.
Um, and it's a really complicated policy change for some reasons. Like
And these are red states, by the way. I mean,
they
like
are.
we should say that this is not New York City where Michael Bloomberg tried to do this.
Yeah.
These are red states.
Yeah, this is happening in closest state to me is Indiana. So I went down to Indiana to talk to grocers, farm advocates, food advocates,
Hmm.
folks who are living in more rural areas that experience one kind of food desert, and folks who live in the more urban area of Gary who experience a different kind of food desert. And I wanted to see what this policy would mean for those people. So it kind of tries to touch on the complicated questions that arise from an administrative change to SNAP, and also from, the intersections of big food companies with local food systems. Yeah, and there's some amazing photographs in there as well that we had the pleasure of having someone take down in East Chicago and Gary. So I'm
Yeah.
really love the photos.
It's a great piece, and I love narrative journalism that really gives you a sense of place,
Mhm.
and that's what this piece does, and also brings you the issue and the debate while it sort of gives you a window into this world. So thank you for that. Next week we actually are premiering a new product here at the Prospect called the Daily Prospect, which is going to be a newsletter focused on our best work of the day. And I'm sure, Emma, your piece is going to be featured in that, in addition to the cover story of the magazine on Greg Kassar. So look for that in your inbox next week. And as always, thank you for joining us here on the weekly roundup. We do this every week at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific. And you can also view this on our website at prospect.org. It'll be up in a little bit here this afternoon. You can watch it at any time throughout your weekend. Check it out and let people know about it. You can subscribe, of course, to where you're watching this right now, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The American Prospect. And as always, you can come on prospect.org each and every day to check it out and check out what we're doing on a daily basis. So thank you for being here. Emma, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.